Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Vienna Live with Simeon Moore and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please go to the LinkedIn Live video feed, the link to which I've just placed in the chat room. Tonight, our featured guest is Ben Cosgrove, a pianist whose latest album, Bearings, will be the subject of tonight's conversation. Welcome, Ben.
Thanks very much for having me.
Ben, so tell us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, how your musical taste were formed, and why you decided to become a professional pianist.
Those are a lot of questions. I'm from I grew up in Massachusetts, like on the Mass New Hampshire border. And I don't know, I guess the inside the jacket pitch for me is I write instrumental piano music about landscape and place. I'm sort of a geography nerd trapped in the body of a piano player. And this is the way I've learned to kind of reconcile those two parts of my personality into one, viable career, hopefully.
And how did that, tell us about the music you listened to growing up, how you then got interested in geography, how that whole thing came together.
Yeah, it seems much more linear in retrospect, but at the time, not at all. I think the shortest answer is that I was really lucky when I was little. When I was 4, we moved to a new house in Methuen, Massachusetts, that had an old piano in it, and I was 4, and I would be like kind of like picking out melodies and stuff on this thing, and I had my parents found a piano teacher in the town next door, who happened to be just exactly the right match for me. Really kind of understood how my brain worked, and really, I then studied with her from when I was 4 to when I was 18. So I had the same teacher that whole time. And she did a lot to, she really kind of de-emphasized all the technical aspects of playing piano and focused a lot on showing me how music could be this sort of fruitful and fun filter through which to explore and experience the world. So I do think I owe a lot about my worldview and the way in which I write and think about music to that kind of early experience.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is a lot of experimenting, playing, in other words, playing music as opposed to listening, more really kind of it was your playground. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that's true. I was like well, a little of each. Like we'd spend whole lessons where like I'd get there and then we would talk about like a song I heard on the radio and like couldn't explain what I liked about it and that sort of thing. So I learned a lot about like how to I don't know, but by the time I was a grown up and was like my job is writing music about landscape, I was very accustomed to writing music about non-musical things. Like she would often send me home at the end of a lesson and say like, oh, like write a song about, this snowstorm that's happening, or write a song about this book you've just been telling me about that you won't shut up about. or so um
Wow, very
that,
exciting. So
oh,
a lot
but by the
different.
time I got to college, and then that is kind of where I learned that I was really interested in landscape study and like environmental humanities and built environment. And um, it felt very natural to kind of like turn my, however you would call like my compositional brain onto that.
Okay, let's listen to another song. This is Salt. Okay, so very dynamic. Tell us about the idea behind this new album, Bearings. Ben, you're saying that this music is, I mean, you grew up making music, experimenting, explaining, giving depictions of non-musical things through music, and then that passion for geography, for landscape seemed to be a natural fit for your music. Tell us about Bearings. Tell us about how you put it all together.
Well, I'm sort of always trying to. Uh, Bearings is my fifth album, I think, since I've started, you know, doing this full time and writing about geography. And I was trying to solve two problems at once in the way I sort of outlined my plan for this record. And I one thing I was thinking about was very pragmatic, and I was noticing that my normal compositional process involves a lot of I'll write a song and then sort of obsessively overthink it for like months and years before I actually record it. By which time I hate it. So I was trying to figure out a way to do, an end run around that a little bit. And then I was also thinking about kind of how I learn and experience landscapes in real life, which always involves a lot of moving around. And I never really feel like I understand where I am in a different landscape until I've kind of traveled through it on foot or on bike or by car even, and kind of seen, this hill from 17 different angles. Um, and can really kind of appreciate it three-dimensionally. So my how I recorded and wrote Bearings was I just booked a bunch of studio time and then walked in for each session with no music pre-written, but then a few big notebooks full of prose about all the particular environments and places and ideas and concepts that I knew I wanted to have songs about, but nothing so much as like and this one will be fast, or this will be in A minor. So then I would have to think as fast as I could and kind of find the song in the moment by moving around the piano the way that you learn a landscape by moving around it. Um, so it was very scary and high pressure in some moments in the studio. But I do think that it was ultimately a very successful experiment. And there's a lot of about these songs that has a lot more kind of um, spontaneity and honestness that I think might have been ironed out if I had been given the opportunity to do that.
And
So
tell
it's
us
a lot
about
of getting
that.
out of my.
Tell us about that change. You walked in kind of nervous. Can I do this? Can I make music the same way that I discover a landscape? Tell us what did you learn in the
Yeah,
end?
I had a bit of faith in it because I do a lot of improvisation and a lot of, I think each of the previous albums as well has, moments on it that are, kind of were written in the studio, kind of in the moment. And those usually wind up being my favorite parts because they can't be measured against sort of an ideal conception of this piece that I kind of had in my head beforehand. Um, but also, like I was paying money for this space, I was paying for the engineer, and I was like, oh my God, what if I can't think of anything? Everybody has good days and bad days, and I was worried that a bad day of mine might align with this recording schedule. But um,
What a
we
great
recorded enough.
venture.
There's a couple songs that we threw out, but by and large, I think everything came out really well. And I would do something like it again, I think, for sure.
We look forward to it. So let's have a listen to another song. This is this rush of beauty and this sense of order.
Oh yeah. So this is from the previous album. We can talk about that in a sec.
Okay. So Ben, tell us again. Now, you have had to choose a whole bunch of landscapes in order to before you got to the recording this, paying for this engineer and all that, you had to go travel around the country, around the world to find these landscapes to be your inspiration to then that you would then reflect. Tell us about what those landscapes are and how you chose them.
Yeah, well, I have to do that, I guess, with every project, but the good news is that sort of comes naturally with being a, touring piano player. Um, I feel like my career has wound up being a very good like two-stroke engine for well, the travel is necessary to perform, and then the it's also necessary to like um yield the raw material that I then write songs about. So um I don't know. I think with bearings, it's much more of a grab bag. Like there's songs about volcanoes and there's songs about, like rural museums and there's songs about tornadoes and But this one, for instance, the song that we just heard is from The Trouble with Wilderness, which is my previous album. And that one I was very intentional about choosing songs that were all about moments of overlap between the built and natural environment. Because I was worried that I was going from town to town, playing these songs every night and talking to people about what they were about. And I was sort of talking about the same genre of place every night, where I had all this music about national parks and wilderness areas and oceans, and um, not a lot of music at all about places that where we think of having people in them. And I was worried that by doing that, I might be like reinforcing an idea about what nature is and where we might find that. And that is not the one I believe in, which of course is, the truth is, as I see it, is, the tree in your backyard is every bit as wild and interesting and worthy of wonder as one in the middle of a national park. So all the songs on Trouble of the Wilderness are about um, moments of overlap between the built and natural environment, where it's hard to tell what is nature and what is not. Like that song is about gardens, which are these funny situations where human beings try to apply right angles and straight lines and like reasonable geometry to all these plants that just sort of on their own would want to like blow up everywhere and do whatever they want. So that tension is very interesting to me.
Okay, let's listen to another song. This is The Museum of Everyday Life.
This is a bearing song. Yeah.
Okay, so this brings us to our philosophical part of the conversation that I know everyone's very excited about every week.
I'm surprised that we
Ben,
haven't been there.
Ben, you describe your work in two sentences, quote, "I don't think of my pieces as rendering places in music, but more just as a way of responding to places musically. Writing music just turns out to be a great way for me to process the world," end quote. That means, Ben, that we've just experienced your musical reactions to several of Earth's landscapes. Let's now hear another person's reaction to several of Earth's landscapes in an article titled Worlding a Broken Body in a Broken World. Rochelle Johnson, an environmental humanities scholar and president of the Thoreau Society, writes, quote, "When Henry David Thoreau walked, he noted the magnificence of the landscape, but he also marked its losses. He noted parts that were vanished and others in the process of vanishing. We see this especially in his journal entry dated the 23rd of March, 1856, where Thoreau dwells on inhabiting a place that is, to use his adjectives, quote, incomplete and imperfect, even mutilated and maimed. We might say that in spite of his mixed metaphors, or perhaps through them, Thoreau longs for an able-bodied earth in a disfigured world. I myself I find myself returning to this passage from Thoreau's journal because on 23rd of March, 1856, his experience of the world is similar to mine and maybe yours. Like many of us, Thoreau knows he walks with and among the disappeared, nonetheless still there. His world is replete with ghosts, each missing mammal, each vanished species, each shrunken stream still present, apparitions felt as he moves through space and time. He walks amid them, even through them. Presences in absence, sounds of silence. End quote. Ben, you and Rochelle are both out on the same walk and for the very same reason. Yet Rochelle's mutilated earth is a world away from the peaceful and exciting musical landscape depictions you've presented us with. Tell us about the world that you are, quote unquote, processing. Why is that world so different from Rochelle's?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would push back on the premise. I don't think that my short answer would be I think it is the same world. It's the same world. Um, there's uh I think a lot to be appreciated in um the last thing I would want to do is just have a bunch of songs that were about how like pretty different fields are. I think what I try to do is write music that's, in one way about landscape, and then in another about, loneliness or disorientation or alienation. Um, or like it's like any of the, constellations of feelings that both an environment or a set of non-geographical circumstances can bring out in us, and kind of like um, one of my favorite things about having chosen this uh, uh, kind of weird set of subject matter for all of my music to be from is uncovering kind of like unexpected moments of resonance that I would say that are people can hear things in my songs that I might not even have thought to, consciously imbue them with. Um,
And
but yeah, no, I do think that while it is true that I do kind of move through the world looking for things to be, um, awed by and like looking for like moments of wonder. I don't, I certainly don't think that I'm ignoring the tough parts.
and Ben, a little bit. I'd like to ask then if there are questions or comments from the participants. But first, I want to say so. Um, Now you're saying that I'd like to know more about the reaction or the reception that your music's had, because in the same Harvard article, Harvard Magazine article that I quoted from, you saying that you process the world through music. You also said that you were influenced by Jan Tiersen, who wrote this kind of easy listening music to a movie. So I imagine that that must be you wouldn't like that if people say, "Oh, well, he writes easy listening music." Tell us what is the reaction? How's the reception been? Have people been on the same wavelength with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's um, the language that I write music in is influenced a lot by like the things I listened to you know, as a teenager. There's a lot of kind of like rock music influence in my songs. There's a lot of I the even the like the song structures for most of what I don't know about most. Probably half of my songs, there's a very kind of like folk songy, verse chorus or like A B like kind of thing to them. Um, but I think everybody winds up with their own language, and then it's the sentences that they then use that language to say that is more interesting to me. So um it works out well for me because I write music that like sounds vaguely like Jan Tiersen, but it gives me an opportunity to talk to people about, you know, uh, like environmental history.
Understood. Are there questions or comments? Anyone? Hi, Dr. Davis. Oh, hi, Victoria. Is Victoria
I
first?
just unmuted myself. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Davis.
Great. Thank you. Ben, very nice. Thank you so much. Trying to put sounds of nature into music. And I think a lot of people do appreciate that. Uh, I don't know where you get your ideas when you were writing Salt and you were writing Wilderness, the first two that we heard,
Mhm.
but it was quite good. And
Thank you.
I used to do a lot of hiking and into the mountains, and I can sometimes hear when I'm hiking uh, songs or music in my mind. But I do have another question. This is more personal. Your name is Ben Cosgrove. Do you
Mhm.
know of any family who lived in Montreal and were a neurologist?
No. Is there a Ben Cosgrove in Montreal doing
Well,
neurology?
when I was a student up there, and you want to go back too many years, to say the least, Dr. Cosgrove was an eminent neurologist at the Montreal Neurological Institute. That's the
No
MNI.
way.
You might want to look into that.
That's there. I do bump into a lot of weirdly the closest that I've there's a Dennis Cosgrove who's I mean, he's not around anymore, but he was this British geographer, and I like wind up reading articles of his very often. Like, wait a second, like, wonder if this guy's an old cousin or something.
Well, you never know. But keep up the good writing. Do you write for bass and for guitar also? I see those instruments behind you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I thought I sort of became a piano player in a very backwards way. I very much self-conceptualized as a multi-instrumentalist until I was into my 20s, and then mostly for like practical reasons, like you had to bring all this junk with you everywhere we go. I sort of boiled down into a piano player,
Very
which
good.
is fun.
Thank
I
you
think.
very much again. Keep
Oh,
up the
thank you.
good work.
Thanks, Dr. Davis. Hi,
Thank you,
Victoria.
Ben.
Yeah. So Ben, it's a little bit of a technical question. We were lucky enough to hear you play the synthesizer at the Concord
Mhm.
Museum, and then we zoomed into you playing in Putney, Vermont on a Steinway Grand. And I
Oh, yeah.
wonder what the difference is for you. It must be two very different experiences, I would think, to try to bring the dynamics out of an electronic instrument versus, a great big physical
Um,
instrument,
I would
Steinway.
say it's more than two different experiences. One of the best and scariest things about being a piano player is that you never really know what you're walking into. Um, I mean, the that show, I think, in particular in Putney, that was like a, a 9 foot concert grant, and like in a room that did not require that. That was a lot of piano for that room. Um, in a weird way, I think it's often harder to be very to be dynamic with an instrument like that, where it's sort of like driving an 18-wheeler through a neighborhood. Like you have to really kind of like it's a lot of you have a lot of power behind you, and sometimes you don't want that. Um, I I'm lucky in that the keyboard that you saw me play with in Concord, Mass was that's been my keyboard for almost 15 years. And I'm madly in love with it. It does exactly what I wanted to do. I've got kind of a sound and I've kind of tweaked it over the years to be, you know, there's very little filter between like a thought happening here and then like emerging from the other side of that keyboard. Um,
Yeah, no, I
and
think we experienced that. It was almost an extension of yourself.
yeah, it's my
We were,
significant other. It's
well, it sounded that way and it felt that way.
Oh, but thank you. Um, but yeah, no, the short answer to your question is yeah, that is one of the fun challenges of playing this particular instrument is that
Yeah,
you've got
yeah,
to kind of adapt each tune and each performance to an instrument that you might not know, but it'll be involved.
thanks.
Thanks, Fred. So let's have another listen. This is our last track of the evening, Volcano. Okay. Last question of the evening. Ben, what do you wish all of us who listen to this album?
Oh, I mean, I certainly hope you enjoy it. But, I would say, um, yeah, well, going back to what we were earlier, I hope that everyone who listens to it finds, something in it that I didn't know was there. Like I really like hearing about um, moments in every song I've written that resonate with people in ways that are unexpected. Like I really like being told that my song about a volcano made somebody else think of merging onto the highway or something like that. It makes the world smaller, and it makes I like when even more kind of unexpected connections between experiences can be, shown by, one of these songs I play every night.
So you'd like us all to be accompanying you listening through these music tracks just as if we were walking with you through those landscapes.
No, I don't think that. I think I would like people uh to critically compare them. I love when people say stuff like you say this song's about Kansas. That's not what it kind of sounds like to me at all. It's like it's much more like that. It doesn't make me feel that way. I choose that example because I have a song about the first time I drove across Western Kansas and felt very like alarmed and disoriented and didn't know how fast I was going or where I was in relation to anything else because I'm not used to being in flat places. Um, and I always play that song when I go through Kansas. It's just so a room full of people can be like, "What the heck are you talking about?" um,
Fantastic. Let's see how we can stay in touch with Ben. It's easy enough. It's bencosgrove.com. And Ben, people can buy the album here. Is that right? Just going to the
that's right.
store?
Yep, that's recommended. Yeah,
Fantastic. So there it
good
has
heart
it.
rate.
We've got the album right there. You can buy it on vinyl or buy the CD or order the digital album. So that is again bencosgrove.com. And Ben, people can also come watch your performances. Is that right?
Yes, I've got a really fun one coming up this weekend. Actually, that Quarry concert. I did it last year, and we're recreating the experience this year. It's a abandoned quarry that's now a nature preserve in the Adirondacks, where a bunch of groups got together and they bring in a grand piano to set up in the middle of this quarry. People kind of sit on all the rocks like an amphitheater. Um, and then I play and like the frogs are going. You can hear the wind in the tree. It's very like one of the more magical physical experiences I've had to play in.
Fantastic. So in a few days, that's at Essex, New York, Essex Quarry Nature Preserve. So we can get all tickets here, RSVP. Again, it's bencosgrove.com/shows. And Ben, if people have questions about anything, they can reach out to you here.
They sure can. Yep. There's oh yeah, Ben at bencosgrove.com. That's the
Okay. So feel free to
best
reach
way to
out to
get.
Ben and let him know your comments about if he's wrong about what his music
Yeah. Tell me
should be
what I'm wrong
represented.
about.
Okay. So let's see thank you so much to Ben Cosgrove.
Thank you.
Let's see what's coming up next week on Vienna Live. We have there, you can also sign up for the weekly Friday greeting by just entering your email. So we have next week is Norma Winstone, Outpost of Dreams. London. Her first ECM recording in 6 years finds British jazz singer Norma Winstone in a new duo with pianist Kit Downs. A unique artist as both jazz vocalist and lyricist, here Norma brings her poetic sensibilities to new pieces by Downs as well as compositions by Carla Bley, Ralph Tower, and John Taylor. The program is completed with fresh perspectives on two traditional tunes, Black is the Color and Rowing Home. Don't miss this chance to meet the legendary artist whose music even Drake is in love with. As always, all information about upcoming shows may be found at www.simeonmoro.com. Again, that is Norma Winstone, Outpost of Dreams, next Wednesday. Again, thank you so much to Ben Cosgrove. Thank you to Victoria and Frederick Mulligan, as well as Agnieszka and Benoit Rivolet for their support of this show. Thanks also to my cousin Mike, a marketer from Layer App. If you're an architect or an engineer, they have a really cool tool you should check out. Thanks also to Mary Schlesinger for the lovely Viennese library you can see behind me. Most of all, thanks to you, our participants who make it all worthwhile. From New London, New Hampshire, and Portland, Maine, goodbye, and see you next Wednesday.
Thank you.